This story is based on true events. It tells the story of a mother's courage, who for decades lived under absolute control and yet chose to confront an entire system to save her own children. When they told her she would never succeed, that's precisely when she decided she would never live in fear again.
I had 8 children sleeping in the back seat. 8 little lives that depended on me for everything, even to breathe hope. In my pocket, only $20, 2 crumpled bills that seemed as fragile as my courage. And yet, on that silent night, those $20 were all I had and all that separated us from the abyss. It was midnight when I closed the front door for the last time. I didn't slam it, I didn't lock it. I just closed it slowly, like someone guarding a secret that can never be told again. The cold air hit my face, and for a moment I thought my legs would give way. But they couldn't. Not that night. Not after so many years dreaming of this moment. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because I knew that if my eyes met that house again, the house where I cried, obeyed, kept silent, and survived, perhaps something inside me would break. Perhaps I would remember the old versions of that still lived there. Perhaps I would hesitate, and hesitating meant going back, and going back meant dying slowly, the same way I had been dying for 17 years. Each step I took towards that car was also a farewell to who I was forced to be. The wife who couldn't question, the mother who watched over her children, the woman who never had a voice. I walked with my heart in my throat, but also with a fire burning inside my chest, because for the first time I knew exactly where I was going. Far away, anywhere but there. In the back seat, my youngest son slept, connected to a feeding tube, so small, so vulnerable, so dependent. I knew that if anyone found out I was taking him, it would be the end. They said a mother like me had no right to decide anything about her own children, much less take them out of that world. And yet, there I was, with 8 of them, crammed together, breathing deeply, blindly trusting that I would save them. My oldest daughter, who is 14, opened her eyes for a few seconds when I started the car. She didn't fully understand why we were running away. She only knew that I needed her to trust me. She didn't ask any questions. She just held her younger sister's hand and closed her eyes again, as if she knew it was safer to sleep than to be afraid. I knew what no one dared to say out loud. No woman had ever managed to leave that place with all her children. Not one. It was impossible. But that night, the impossible had a face, a name, and it pulsed like a desperate heart inside my chest. When I shifted into first gear, I felt something break inside me. It wasn't fear, it was the chain, it was obedience, it was the destiny that had been written for me, and which I, for the first time, refused to accept. In that silent early morning, I ceased to be just another invisible wife. I was Carolyn Jessop, and I had chosen freedom, even if it cost me everything. I was 7 years old when I understood that my life wasn't my own. It was a winter morning in Hilldale, Utah. The snow covered everything, and the silence was so heavy it felt like it weighed on my shoulders. My mother was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough so hard the table shook. I knew what was coming. I always knew. My older sister whispered, "Go on, just give her a beating so she'll calm down." We had a strategy. Early in the morning, before breakfast, we'd volunteer to take a beating. That way, the rest of the day was easier. It sounds crazy, I know, but when you grow up in a house where pain is guaranteed, you learn to control at least when it comes. My mother wasn't bad. She was broken. My father had 3 wives. She was the first, but not the favorite. And everything she couldn't yell at him, she took out on us. I grew up knowing that women had no voice, only obligations. FLDS wasn't just a church. It was a world apart, a place where the prophet spoke for God, and God always asked for difficult things, like giving your 18-year-old daughter to a man you barely knew, like accepting your husband bringing another wife home, like smiling and saying, Amen, when everything inside you screamed no. I was a sixth-generation polygamist. My great-grandfather had 7 wives, my grandfather 5. My father started with 1 and added more as the prophet commanded. When I was 9, he married my mother's niece. She was 22. I had called her aunt the week before. On Sunday, she became my stepmother. Nobody talked about it. We just lowered our heads and carried on. When I was 15, something strange happened. I went to Salt Lake City to spend a year with relatives. It was the first time I saw the outside world. Girls my age wore jeans. They laughed loudly in the street. They chose their own friends. And nobody looked at them like they were merchandise, waiting to be distributed. I returned to Hilldale a different person, quieter, more attentive. I started reading books hidden under my bed. I dreamed of being a doctor. I wanted to save lives. I wanted to be someone who mattered, but dreams are expensive at FLDS, especially for girls. I had just turned 18 when my father called me in for a talk. He was tense. He spoke quickly without looking me in the eye. The prophet had a revelation about you. My stomach turned to ice. You're going to marry Merrill Jessop. Merrill Jessop, 50 years old, 3 wives, 32 children, some older than me. A man known for his coldness, his control, the way he broke women until they stopped questioning. I want to go to college, I said. My voice came out thin, almost fading away. You will go. The prophet allowed it, but only if you marry Merrill. That's when I understood. It wasn't a blessing. It was a deal. My father owed Merrill something, and I was the bargaining chip. 3 weeks later, I was in a wedding dress I hadn't chosen, next to a man I didn't love, promising eternal obedience to someone I barely knew. The ceremony was quick, no celebration, no joy, just witnesses and the prophet's voice saying that this was God's will. Merrill didn't smile. He didn't look at me fondly. He saw me as a newly acquired object, just another wife for the list, just another womb to produce children for the kingdom. When we arrived at his house, reality hit me like a punch. It was a huge mansion, but cold. White walls, parquet floors creaking with every step. The smell of reheated food and old mold and silence. A heavy silence, full of unspoken secrets. Merrill took me to the room. He locked the door. I was trembling, not from cold, from fear. He started to speak, but I couldn't hear the words. I only saw his mouth moving, his empty eyes, his large hands drawing closer. Take off your dress, I obeyed. Because that's what I've been taught my whole life, to obey. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter if you want to. Just obey. He pushed me onto the bed. He forcefully spread my legs. I closed my eyes and prayed for it to end soon. But he couldn't. He couldn't get an erection. I lay there, naked, feeling the humiliation burn my face. Was it my fault? Was God punishing me? Was I really that undesirable? Merrill stood up, huffing with anger. Tomorrow will be different, he said, and he left the room, leaving me alone. I dressed slowly. I sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time since it all began, I let the tears fall. These weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something worse. They were the tears of someone who realizes they've just entered a prison without visible walls, a prison made of commandments, obedience and fear. The next day I met the other wives. Faunita, the first one, had barely left the room. I caught a glimpse of her, a ghostly woman with sunken eyes, who lived doped up on medication just to endure her own life. Ruth, the second one, had sudden crying fits. She hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Be careful with Barbara." And then I saw her, Barbara. She was in the kitchen, wearing an impeccable apron, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She smiled at me. But it wasn't a welcoming smile. It was the smile of someone who had just gained another piece on the chessboard. "Welcome to the family," she said, with a faint sweetness that cut deeper than any insult. I forced a smile back, and it was at that moment that I understood I hadn't married Meryl. I had entered a war, a silent war, where the weapons were jealousy, manipulation, children used as shields, and the approval of a man who saw us all as disposable property. Barbara was the queen of that house, and I was the threat, young, fertile, capable of stealing what little attention she still received. She wasn't going to let that happen. I looked around. The walls seemed to close in. The air grew heavier. And I thought, for the first time, but not the last, how do I get out of here? But that morning, the answer still didn't exist. So I lowered my head as I had been taught. I took a deep breath, and I waited. Because sometimes surviving is just that, waiting, observing, conserving strength, until the day you can't take it anymore. My first year of marriage taught me something no one talks about regarding polygamy. It's not about love. It never was. It's about power. And in Meryl Jessop's house, Barbara held all the power. She controlled the money. She decided who ate what. She chose which children deserved new clothes and which ones would wear the old ones until they fell apart. Meryl consulted her on everything. The other wives, we were just pawns in her game. I was the youngest, the prettiest, according to the uncomfortable stares I received. And because of that, I was the most dangerous. Barbara started slowly. A comment here, an insinuation there. "Carolyn, you don't know how to cook properly. Let me teach you." Meryl said, "You're gaining weight. You better control it, right? Your children are going to be difficult. I see it in your eyes. There's a lot of rebellion in you." Each word was like a needle, small, precise, penetrating deep. Ruth was different. She tried to be my friend, but Ruth lived in another world. Sometimes she would hug me, crying, and say, "I'm pregnant with Jesus." Other times she would stand there for hours staring at the wall, talking to people who didn't exist. She needed help, doctors, real medicine. But the FLDS didn't believe in psychiatry. Mental problems were a lack of faith, and lack of faith was a sin. So Ruth kept breaking things, and nobody did anything about it. I saw Fonita even less. She lived locked in her room, sleeping all day, only waking up at night to watch TV in silence. 10 children, 30 years of marriage. And what did she have to show for it? Deep depression, medications that didn't cure anything, and a husband who didn't even remember her name properly anymore. One night, in the early hours of the morning, I found her in the kitchen. She was eating stale bread, standing up, in the dark. "So you're still young," she said, without looking at me. "Run while you still can." I froze. "But how?" She gave a sad, Empty smile. I don't know. Nobody knows. That's why I'm still here. And he went back to his room. Merrill wasn't violent in a physical sense. He didn't hit. He didn't yell. He was worse. He destroyed through silence, through indifference, through the way he ignored you in front of others, through the way he called you darling, but confused your name with his daughters. Yes, he called me by his daughters' names, daughters who were my age, daughters he looked at in a way he shouldn't have, and I pretended not to see, because to see was to accept, and to accept was to go mad. Sex with Merrill wasn't love. It was a negotiation. If I refused, Barbara gained power. She would go to him, whisper something in his ear, and suddenly my children would lose privileges. My food would disappear from the refrigerator. My room would be left without heating in the winter. So I learned. I learned to use my body as a weapon for survival. If I slept with him, I bought myself days of peace. Barbara became quieter. My children ate better. I received crumbs of attention that kept me alive in the household hierarchy. I hated every second, every touch, every forced moan. But I was 18 years old, and nobody taught me any other way to survive. When I first became pregnant, I felt relief and terror at the same time. Children were currency. The more children you gave your husband, the more favors you gained. But also, each child was another mouth to feed, another heart to protect, another soul you prayed wouldn't break like your own. My first child was born at home, without a doctor, without anesthesia, without anything but a church midwife and an order to remain silent. Faithful women don't scream during childbirth, Barbara told me, while I bit down on a cloth to avoid yelling in pain. When he finally left, I cried, not from joy, from exhaustion, from fear, from knowing that now I had one more reason not to be able to escape. The years passed in cycles: pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding, pregnancy again. I had 8 children. 8. After the 4th incision, the doctors warned me, "Your body can't take any more." I told Merrill. He laughed. "God decides how many children you will have, no doctor." So I continued, because I had no choice. My 8th pregnancy almost killed me. Hemorrhage, sky-high blood pressure, placenta attached where it shouldn't be. I needed an emergency hysterectomy, surgery, blood, doctors rushing around. I almost didn't make it back. Merrill didn't visit me in the hospital, not even once. Barbara left. She stood in the doorway of the room, arms crossed, and said, "Now you're no longer fit to have children. You'll have to find another way to be useful." And he left. But there was something good about that surgery, something I only realized later. Without a uterus, I could no longer get pregnant. And without pregnancy, I had something I didn't have before: time, mental clarity, space to think. For the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and didn't just see a baby-making machine. I saw a woman, tired, broken, but still alive. And yes, I could plan. My son Harrison was born perfect, but at 6 months old, he got cancer, a brain tumor, surgeries, treatments that almost killed him. He survived, but was left with serious after effects, severe disability, feeding tube, required 24-hour care. Merrill looked at him and said, "This is punishment. God is punishing you for your sins." I didn't answer. I just hugged my son and cried. Barbara pushed his other children away. "Don't come near him. He's cursed." But I didn't let him. I took care of him, alone, without help, because if I didn't take care of him, nobody would. And it was while caring for Harrison that I learned something important. A mother's love is not destiny. It's a choice. And if I could choose to love, I could also choose to leave. The other wives kept arriving. Kathleen, Tammy, 2 more later. Each time Merrill got married, the house became more tense. Less food, less money, more arguments. Barbara remained on top, but now she had more rivals, and that made her even more ruthless. I remember one night when Ruth tried to strangle Barbara. Yes, strangle her. Because Barbara had said that Ruth's mental problems were just a fad. Merrill arrived, yelled at Ruth, and told her to calm down. No one was arrested, no one was hospitalized, no one received help. Because in FLDS, women didn't matter. Only obedience mattered. I stopped crying. I stopped complaining. I stopped waiting for someone to save me because I understood no one was going to save us. If I wanted to go out, I would have to do it alone. So I started observing, taking notes, learning. Where were my children's documents kept? Where did Merrill keep the money? Which days did he go out? What times was the house empty? I smiled. I obeyed. I pretended I was broken. But inside, I was sharpening the blade because every war has an end, and mine was only just beginning. Everything changed when Warren Jeffs took power. Until then, the FLDS was controlled, rigid, but it had some breathing room. You could go to public school, read books, listen to music, watch TV. But when Rulon Jeffs died in 2003 and Warren took the throne, he didn't come as a leader. He came as a dictator. Dictators don't want followers, they want slaves. The first thing Warren did was close the public schools. Outside teachers are corrupted, he said in a sermon. They teach lies of the devil. So he opened church schools, schools where no one taught math or science, only obedience, only fear. I was a teacher. I had over 300 children's books stored in my house, books that I used to teach my children how to dream. Warren ordered, "Burn all secular books." I watched them throw everything into a bonfire. Stories, poems, knowledge turning to ashes. My daughter Betty cried. She loved to read. "Mom, why?" I didn't know how to answer because I didn't have an answer that made sense. Warren was obsessed with control. Every detail of our lives had to go through him. He banned the color red. He said it was the color of the devil. He banned toys. He banned loud laughter. He banned anything that resembled happiness. Suffering purifies, he used to say. Joy is a sign of pride. Girls as young as 12 and 13 began to disappear. Arranged marriages in the middle of the night. Without consent. Without choice. One of them was my stepdaughter. She was 12 years old. Warren married her off to a 50-year-old man. She cried all night before the wedding. I hugged her and said, "It will pass." But it was a lie. And we both knew it. Merrill adored Warren. He saw him as the perfect prophet. He obeyed every order without question. Several of Merrill's daughters were given to Warren as wives. He collected girls as trophies. I saw one of them, Annette, crying after Warren publicly humiliated her. He dragged her by the hair through a room full of people because she had looked at a boy. Her hair was so long it fell to her knees. He twisted and twisted until she fell to her knees screaming, and nobody did anything. Because questioning Warren was questioning God, and questioning God meant losing everything. I tried to ask for help once, just once. I went to Warren in person. I told him that Merrill was mistreating me, that I was being abused, that my children were suffering. He looked at me with contempt. Merrill is a just man. You are an immoral woman for speaking ill of your husband. My father was there. He tried to intervene. Warren, my daughter has endured too much already. If you don't provide some protection for her, you're going to have problems. Warren smiled, a cold smile. The problem. She is the problem. Women like her destroy families. My father lowered his head. He had tried. But even he was afraid of Warren. I left that room knowing I was alone. No one was going to protect me. No one was going to listen to me. If I wanted to leave, it had to be quietly, without asking permission, without waiting for approval. Warren started breaking up families, literally. If a man disobeyed, Warren would take his wives and children and give them to another man. Entire families torn apart overnight. Children crying. Mothers being torn from their children. Parents watching everything crumble because they questioned an order. And the worst part was, nobody reacted because reacting meant dying socially, losing salvation, becoming nothing. I saw men crying silently, women disappearing, children being sent to Texas, to the new ranch Warren was building, the YFZ ranch, a walled place, isolated, where no one entered or left without permission, a concentration camp disguised as a temple. Merrill was chosen to be the bishop of the ranch in Texas. He was proud. It was power. It was status. He started spending more time there. And when he was home, he became more cruel, colder. One of my children got sick. High fever, vomiting, pain. I begged them to take him to the doctor. Merrill glared at me angrily. You can take him to any doctor you want, but none of them will be able to cure him. God will destroy his life because of his sins. My son was 7 years old, 7, and Merrill blamed him. He blamed me. He blamed everyone except his own coldness. I took my son to the hospital in secret. I used money I had saved. He was treated. He survived. And I decided, enough is enough. Warren started talking about the apocalypse. He said the world was going to end, that only the faithful would survive, that we needed to prepare. He ordered walls to be built around the ranch, watchtowers, armed guards. No one leaves, no one enters. We are protecting ourselves from evil. But the evil was inside. It always had been. I heard rumors of children being abused, of girls getting pregnant at 14, of Warren recording the rapes and calling them spiritual consecrations. I felt disgust, anger, despair, and I thought about my children. What would happen to them if we stayed? Betty was already 14. Warren could give her to any man he wanted. My boys would grow up thinking all of that was normal. No, it wasn't going to happen. I started planning, seriously now. It wasn't just fantasy anymore. It was an escape plan. I gathered documents, secretly, birth certificates, vaccination records, papers that proved those children were mine. I saved money. $20 here, 10 there, every penny I could hide. I studied routes, schedules, maps. I memorized the locations of the shelters in Salt Lake City. Who could help me? Who wouldn't turn me in? I smiled. I obeyed. I pretended I was cured. But inside, I was counting the days. Warren was arrested in 2006, accused of arranging a minor's marriage. He became a fugitive. The FBI is on his trail. But even in prison, he continued to give orders, tapes recorded, orders sent, remote control. My imprisonment is a test of faith, he said. Obey and you will be saved. And they obeyed. Blindly, Merrill remained loyal, defending Warren and saying it was all persecution. I looked at him and thought, "You'll never change." And that's when I knew for sure I was going to leave with my 8 children, even if it was impossible, because it was impossible to stay. April 21st, 2003, Monday, midnight. That was the night. I knew because I had planned every second, every detail, every movement. Merrill had left for a meeting in Texas. He would be gone for 3 days. Barbara was sleeping upstairs. The house was quiet. It was now or never. I woke the children one by one, whispering, without turning on the light, "Put on your shoes. Take only what fits in your backpack. Don't make any noise." They looked at me with fear, confusion, but they obeyed. Betty, the oldest, asked, "Mom, are we coming back?" I didn't lie. No. She swallowed hard, but she grabbed her backpack. Harrison, my disabled son, was sleeping in his crib. He was 4 years old. He couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He needed a feeding tube 24 hours a day. I picked him up, wrapped him in a blanket, and carried the bag with the medical equipment. My heart was beating so fast, I was sure someone would hear it. We went down, one step at a time. The wooden floor creaked. Each sound seemed like thunder. One of the children tripped. The backpack hit the wall. I froze. Silence. I counted to 10. Nobody woke up. We continue. When we got to the car, my hands were shaking so much I could barely put the key in the ignition. The 8 children sat in the back. Harrison was on my lap, backpack strapped tightly together, eyes wide open. "Mom, where are we going?" my son Arthur asked. I started the engine. "For freedom." And I drove off. The first half hour was total silence. I couldn't believe it had worked, that no one had woken up, that we had left. But then the paranoia began. Every passing car could be someone from the church. Every headlight could be Merrill returning. Every sound was a threat. I gripped the steering wheel so hard that my fingers hurt. Betty started crying in the back seat. "We're going to hell, Mom. The prophet said so. Whoever leaves the church loses their salvation." I took a deep breath. "Betty, listen. God doesn't live in a church. He lives in places where people are free, where no one hurts children, where mothers can protect their children." She didn't answer, but she stopped crying. We crossed the border from Arizona to Utah, 3 hours on the road, straight through, non-stop. My eyes burned. My body was stiff, but I couldn't stop because stopping would give someone else a chance to catch up with us. We passed through Colorado City. The whole city was FLDS, flatliners, dying green. If anyone saw me, I was finished. I lowered my head. I accelerated. I prayed. Nobody stopped us. When I saw the sign, Salt Lake City, 50 kilometers, I let out a sigh that seemed to have been bottled up for years. The sun began to rise, orange, red, gold. I had never seen such a beautiful sunrise. I arrived at the shelter at 6 in the morning. A simple, gray building with a discreet sign on the door, Women's Refuge. I parked. I turned off the engine. I looked at the back seat. 8 children were asleep, exhausted, scared, but safe. I had done it. I had taken my children out of there. No woman from FLDS had ever achieved this before. Not one, but I succeeded. I entered the shelter carrying Harrison. A woman greeted me. Short hair, a tattoo on her arm, a tired but kind smile. "Did you run away?" I nodded. "How many children?" 8. Her eyes widened. 8? 8. She hugged me, and I broke down. I cried. I cried all the tears I hadn't been able to shed in the last 17 years. I cried from relief, from fear, from exhaustion. "You are brave?" she said. I shook my head. "I'm not brave. I just had no other choice." But there was something I didn't know yet, something I only discovered later. Escaping was only the beginning. Because FLDS doesn't let anyone leave, they come after them. They threaten them. They sue them. And Meryl was going to fight for her children. She was going to use all the power she had. She was going to try to break me again. But this time, I wasn't alone. This time, I had the law on my side, and I was going to fight to the end. The first few months away from FLDS were the hardest of my life. Not because life was hard, it was, but because I was learning to live again. Learning that it wasn't a sin to wear jeans, that it wasn't disobedience to choose what to eat, that it wasn't wrong to laugh loudly. It sounds silly, I know. But for someone who spent 35 years being controlled, every simple choice was a revolution. The shelter gave us a room, small, 2 bunk beds, a shared bathroom, 8 children, 1 mother, $20 in her pocket. I needed a job, a school for the boys, documents, a lawyer. But more than anything, I needed courage, because Meryl already knew and he was coming. 2 weeks after the leak, I received the first call. He was my father. "Carolyn, come back. Meryl has forgiven you. God has forgiven you. But you need to come back." I took a deep breath. "I'm not coming back, Dad. You're going to lose your children. Meryl is going to sue you. He has money, lawyers, power. You have nothing. I have them, and that's all." I hung up. Meryl filed for custody. He asked for his 8 children back. He said I was unstable, that I had kidnapped the children, that I was a bad influence. My lawyer, appointed by the state, looked at me with pity. "Carolyn, no woman from the FLDS has ever won full custody of her children. Never. You'll be lucky if you get visitation." I looked him in the eyes. "Then I'll be the first." The trial lasted for months. Hearings, testimonies, investigations. Betty, my oldest daughter, was torn. She loved her father. She missed church. She didn't understand why I had done that. I tried to explain, but she didn't want to listen. "You destroyed our family," she told me one night. That hurt more than anything Meryl had ever done. But I understood. She had been indoctrinated her whole life. Breaking that would take time, maybe years, maybe never. Meryl appeared in court in a suit. Clean, polite, calm. He seemed like a loving grandfather, a man of faith, a concerned father. I looked like a crazy person. Messy hair, dark circles under my eyes, thrift store clothes, but I had something he didn't. The truth. I told everything. The abuse, the forced polygamy, the child marriages, the threats, the control. I brought evidence, documents, witnesses, and for the first time in my life, someone listened to me. The judge listened to me. In December 2003, the verdict was delivered. Full custody granted to Carolyn Jessop. I was the first woman in history to win a custody case against the FLDS. The first one. I left the courthouse and fell to my knees in the parking lot. I hugged my children and cried, not sadness, victory, but life didn't turn into a fairy tale. Reality was much harsher. I worked 3 jobs, teacher during the day, seamstress at night, cleaner in the early morning. The boys needed therapy. Harrison needed expensive treatments. Bills were piling up. There were days when I only ate bread and butter so they could eat rice with chicken. There were nights when I cried in the shower with the hot water hiding the tears. But I didn't give up, because freedom isn't easy. It never has been, but it's worth every second. Betty remained conflicted. She blamed me. She hated me. She missed her father. When she turned 18, she contacted me. "Mom, I'll be back." My heart stopped. "Betty, please. You know what's in there. You know what they do." "I know, but it's my choice, and I had to accept it. Because I fought for freedom, and freedom means letting people choose, even when that choice destroys you." She went back to the ranch in Texas, to the cult, to control. I cried for weeks, but I didn't force her to stay, because forcing it would mean repeating what they did to me. In 2006, Warren Jeffs was arrested. Finally, the FBI caught him driving a red car, the color he himself had banned. Divine irony, perhaps. He was convicted of facilitating rape, child marriage, abuse. My testimony was used in the trial. My story helped put him behind bars. When I heard the sentence, I didn't celebrate. I just breathed a sigh of relief, a long sigh, relieved, free. Today, my children are grown. Most of them have left the shadow of FLDS. They've built lives. They've moved on. Harrison still needs care. But he smiles. And when he smiles, I know it was all worth it. Betty is still there. I pray for her every day. I hope she'll come back someday. But if she doesn't, I'll still love her, because love is not possession. It is liberation. I wrote a book. I told my story. Thousands of people read it. Some cried. Others called me a liar. But I didn't write to be believed. I wrote to be heard. And I went. My voice echoed. And other women began to come out. Slowly. One at a time. I didn't save everyone, but I saved some. And some is better than none. Sometimes I think, what if I had stayed? Would it be easier? Maybe, but I wouldn't be alive, not really. I would be just a shadow, obedient, silent, invisible. And my children would grow up thinking that shadows were all they could be. No, I chose the light, even if it burned, even if it hurt, because light hurts when you've spent too much time in the dark. But once your eyes adjust, you never want to go back. Today I wake up and choose my coffee. I choose my clothes. I choose where to go. They seem like small choices. But to me, they're huge. Because every choice is proof that I exist. What do I care about? That I am free. And freedom, I discovered, is not the absence of fear. It takes courage to act even when afraid. It's about looking at the impossible and saying, it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to try. I tried, and I succeeded. If I could do it, you can too.
This was just one part of Carolyn Jessop's incredible journey. Her courage not only transformed the lives of her 8 children, but helped expose the abuses of the FLDS and contributed to the arrest of Warren Jeffs, one of America's most dangerous cult leaders. Today, Carolyn lives free, defends other women who escape abusive situations, and proves that no prison is too strong when the will to live is greater than the fear. And you? Have you ever had to choose freedom even when everyone said it was impossible? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it. Someone out there might need to hear that courage begins with a single step. To learn all the details of Carolyn's story, including the landmark legal battle and the impact she had on the fight against religious cults, check out the first pinned comment.